Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Move Daily Talks. I'm your host, Tracy Steen. Today, I'm welcoming James Ellis onto the podcast. James Ellis of Fabulous Beyond 40 is a man on a mission, a former journalist, now turned nutritionist. He has worked with hundreds of women over the years and understands what a transformative and challenging phase of life perimenopause and menopause can be. So, James has dedicated time to listening and understanding his female clients and undertaking specialist training in female health, perimenopause, and menopause. He's also a member of the British Menopause Society, the official organization in the UK for healthcare professionals working in this area. James co-owns Fabulous Beyond 40 with Julie Madacey and is also the director of health recipe site Elevated Food for Life. We're definitely going to jump into this conversation about food, what his recommendations are as we move into perimenopause and menopause. Those things shift, don't they? We need to be a little bit more dialed into our nutrition, understand what is going to benefit us, what might deter us from reaching our targets. I'm looking forward to talking with James today. All right, let's dive in. So I'm going to ask you a question to just jump off this podcast. I would love to know, what do you love about what you do for a living, James?
I like helping people get healthier. Like many health coaches, I had an epiphany of my own. I used to
Mm-hmm.
be a health editor working in newspapers many years ago, and I was probably the worst health editor here in the UK, purely because I didn't do any of the advice. I didn't follow any of the advice that I gave my readers. So I was a
As we
hardworking,
do.
yeah, hard drinking young journalist, burn the candle at both ends. In 2006, I lost my dad, and that was a real wake up for me because I lost him through what would have been preventable causes if he'd had a better lifestyle. I might share this later on, but I'd lost connection with my dad for a long time, and so we'd only just reconnected when he passed away, and that made me reassess my lifestyle. At the same time, my wife and I were well my then future wife and I were just about to get married. We wanted to have kids. I wanted to make sure that my kids wouldn't be in the same place that I was in, whereby they felt the loss of a parent relatively early. And so I flipped my life entirely. I got a nutritionist, I got a personal trainer, I lost a shed load of weight, I stopped drinking as much, I totally stopped smoking, I improved my diet. I lost the equivalent of 7 kilos, 8 kilos, so about 16 pounds. So lost quite a little bit of weight, started running again. And when I saw the effect that it had on my life, I just wanted to share that more often. And suddenly writing about health and being a journalist seemed less important rather than actually getting in at the coalface, let's say, and actually helping people directly.
Yeah. So, what was the effect that it had on your life?
Oh, I mean, it changed magically for the better, right? I felt younger, I felt healthier, I felt less aches and pains, I felt more of a sense of achievement by being able to do things that I'd not been able to do previously. And I suppose the ultimate thing was us having kids because a couple of years later we went on to have a pair of very healthy twins who are now 14 years old, full of hormones, raging, and testing my wife and I on a regular basis. But having that gift of having kids was absolutely beautiful, and I think it was a direct result of me changing my lifestyle.
I think it happens this way for a lot of people. We come to a critical impasse, don't we? We're at that moment where we're like, okay, something somewhere's got to give. This can't be all that life is about. And sometimes it's when a parent dies or we lose something and we come to that bottom and we're like, okay, well, let's just make this big shift. And it sounds like it happened like that for you. Sometimes it happens early in our 20s, 30s, but for a lot of people, it's still, they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and it still hasn't happened.
Sure. I mean, when I was a young guy, I thought of myself as being quite rock and roll, and I always had that adage, only the good die young. Let's milk life for everything it's got and all that kind of stuff. And suddenly I got to like mid 30s, late 30s, early 40s, and I was thinking, hold on a minute, I don't want to die young. I want to be around for a long time, right? And so I think that is when things changed for me. When I changed that mindset, it just changed my life life
Yeah.
totally. And 14 years later, here I am.
And I think that sometimes we associate a good life and a fun life, when we're younger with drinking and partying and, being involved in that world. But for me now, as I've aged, what brings me that real good feeling of joy and happiness and that I'm living my life to the fullest is more about adventure and opportunities and experiences. And it doesn't have to include alcohol and partying and the club, right? It's shifted. And I don't know if there's a lot of young people. There's definitely some that experience that early on, that it doesn't necessarily have to be that other environment that could be more toxic to the body, that could make us feel not our best within our physical body. But generally, we have to go through that phase, don't we? Like, it's like, okay, it's just like a rite of passage. We go from teenagehood into young adulthood, and this is what we do, and this is what our environment does. And yeah, it's too bad that we miss out on living life to the fullest in a healthy way when we're younger. And sometimes we don't get there until we're older. It's strange that way.
That's the kind of stuff that comes with experience, right? The older you get, the more mindful you are of where your life's going, what your legacy in life wants to be, because we're only here for a short time, right? So why not leave the best things behind that you can? And if that is passing on the knowledge and the wisdom that you've gained through the years of being moved from that stage and moving on to a more healthy lifestyle, I think that's an amazing legacy to leave. And one thing that I would say is that one of the things that I've noticed recently is there's an increasing trend, at least here in the UK, for younger people not to be selecting and choosing that really sort of like hard drinking, hard partying lifestyle. Yeah, they still like going out, they still like going to a club, they still like dancing, but they're much more mindful of how much they drink, what that might do to their bodies, and probably take much better care of themselves than I would have done when I was at their age. When I was in my 20s and 30s, it was a rite of passage to go
Yeah.
out and drink 10, 12 beers. And that was the thing that we celebrated in my generation. And now it's like, I'm happy with half a glass of kombucha rather than
I
rather than
know.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're right. I think it is shifting, definitely shifting. And I think it's because there's just so much more information out there on how to optimize for longevity and also, just with alcohol in general, just what it can do to the body and what it does to the body. So that knowledge, that information, those podcasts, that coaching that's out there now is not what we had when I was a young adult, definitely. So it's nice to see that. Um, how did you get into working with women? Because you're not one. How did you get
well,
into that?
that's the $64,000 question, right? That every
Okay.
single every single person asks me that question, and it's a valid question. So I'm going to blame my mum, right? I'm a bit of
Okay.
a mum in sport. Um,
Okay.
my company is called Fabulous Beyond 40, and that is my aim to help women 40 and above still feeling amazing and to live the second part of their lives with as much verve and vitality as they can. And so my mum, Audrey, she's 91 now. When she was 42, she to me was the prototype of a woman who could be fabulous beyond 40. If I take you back to the mid 70s, Tracy, her and my dad had a pub. Um, he wasn't the best partner. She decided to separate. She'd never really left this tiny village in the north of England that she lived in. Decided to go on vacation twice to Greece. And she went to Greece and she fell in love with Greece. And she decided at 42 to divorce my dad, sell half the business. She bought a car, here in the UK, we'd call a caravan. In North America, people would call a trailer. And she decided to pack herself, my 21-year-old female cousin, my 12-year-old sister, and myself at 10 into that caravan and drive to Greece through what used to be Eastern Europe, through Yugoslavia, through all the communist bloc countries. Her family was so shocked by this, like her brothers and sisters and things like that. One of her brothers didn't speak to her for 5 years because he thought she was going to go to this country and, put herself in danger, put her young kids in danger, and all this kind of stuff. So my mum was that paradigm for me, if you like, of somebody who set out to achieve a goal and better her life at a time when everybody else was telling her, you shouldn't be doing this. And I think that was an amazing example for me. The flip side of that was that we left a relatively comfortable life as kids here, where mum and dad earned a decent living. And we went to Greece, and my mum was working 7 jobs to look after myself and my sister. As a result of that, we spent some time living in a holiday park in the caravan stroke trailer. And then we moved into an apartment eventually. When we moved into an apartment, we couldn't afford to pay the rent. So my mum got lots of her female friends who worked with her to come and stay with us and flat share and things like that. So I was always surrounded by women all my formative years, no male influence at all. My dad was still in England. As I shared earlier, it was much later that I got back in touch with my dad and we reconnected. And so I think that has given me maybe an insight or a better connection with women as they mature. If I fast forward a number of years, and when I left journalism in 2009, I retrained originally as a personal trainer, then as a nutritionist, then as a health coach. And for some reason, most of my clients tended to be women of a slightly older age. So I'm talking 30 and above at the time. I was in my late 30s by then. And I'm not a guy's guy. I'm not, I like hanging around with my buddies and things like that, but I'm not the guy who's sort of like down the sports bar every 2 minutes and that kind of thing. I feel much more comfortable in the company of women. And so I think that somehow worked as a connection between me and the women that I was working for. That's maybe why they sought me out. I wasn't sort of like some 19-year-old buff guy down at the gym who was trying to beast them as a personal trainer or things like that. I had a much better understanding and acceptance of the challenges and the barriers to a healthy lifestyle because I'd lived those barriers myself. And so as my clientele aged with me, they started entering the perimenopause phase, and they started asking me about, what do you know about perimenopause? I was like, well, yeah, I've kind of heard of it. So this is like 7, 8, 9 years ago now. Right? Nobody was talking about it at the time. Just a few people had started on this journey of talking about it. And so I made it my mission to learn about what was going on, to find out what was happening with female hormones, to find out what was changing their lives, to talk to my clients and beyond my clients, my friends, my family. If I look at my life, my mum's still alive. I had a stepmom. I've got 3 stepsisters. I've got 3 sister-in-laws, and I've got 2 mother-in-laws. And I've got twin daughters who are 14, who are also, as I shared previously, hormonal. I've got twin female cats, and I've got a female dog. So I'm literally surrounded by women, Tracy, in my life. And so I use them as a test bed to learn, to experiment, to find out more. I did some learnings and some courses, and that's kind of where it comes from. And ultimately, as a health coach, our job is to help people be able to move a step further forward in their journey. That's really my belief. And so if you're a woman of 40 and above and you come into my world and you decide that working with a male health coach is not for you, I am absolutely fine with that because ultimately I've helped you move a step forward. You've made a decision in the direction of who can help me, right? And if it's not a guy, then you're thinking about finding a woman. So you're a step closer to finding someone you want to work with. And I think if that's all I do to help people move along that journey, then that's a great thing. Luckily, I have a lot of women who place their trust in me and actually do want to work with a guy and are happy to work with a guy. And I'd caveat that by saying as well, it's not a prerequisite for a gynecologist or an obgyn to be female. So I'm not sure it really needs to be. I mean, of course, have I had a hot flush? No, I've not. But I've talked to lots and lots of women who have. So
Yeah.
I guess that hopefully that explains it a little bit.
You've spent your life surrounded by women, so there's no doubt that you have seen stressors arise in these women's lives and perhaps ultimately take them down a path that they don't want to go down, but it's inevitable. Let's talk about stress in our lives as we age. Now, I think I read that you say that that's one of the biggest detriments to the perimenopausal, menopausal woman. Why is this the case with that stress is such an important factor that we need to pay attention to?
Okay, so I guess there's 2 things really. One is if I try and describe a typical client of mine, she's probably 40 and above. maybe a career woman, and this is not typical of everybody, but generally, maybe a career woman who started a family later. She still wants to be incredible at a job. She still wants to be an amazing mum. She still wants to be an amazing wife or partner to her other half. She's probably at an age where she's got aging parents, so she's parenting upwards and downwards. And then obviously friends, family, the PTA at school comes calling and she sticks her hand up and says, yes, the kids want a lift to soccer practice on Saturday, and she's sticking her hand up and saying yes. And it's a tried and tested trope in health and fitness these days that we always say put on your own oxygen mask first. But the truth is that those kind of things become cliches because they're true, right? And if you aren't looking after yourself and you've got all these other people that you're trying to care for, then how do you look after yourself? So time compressed, always on the go, always on the run, often putting yourself at the very, very end of this sort of like care chain, if you like. That, of course, leads to a number of stresses because you know there's a question. As soon as you can't do something right, a woman's well, anybody would, but particularly women at this age, I feel, start to question their ability to do things. So it's like, am I a good mum? Am I good at my job? Am I a good partner? And that negative self-talk starts. So that starts off a cascade of am I good enough talk. And I think that's really important to try and reduce that. And so to try and reduce some of those stresses, to try and normalize the idea that it's okay to take 10 minutes of intentional self-care. And I say intentional, very intentionally, if you like, because a lot of the women that I know get half an hour, they go to the gym and they think, right, I've got to smash a hit session. And so they smash a hit session. And what they're effectively doing is putting their body under yet another stressor on top of all the others. Now, from a physiological point of view, many of the women who come and see myself and my business partner are one of the biggest challenges that they tend to have is they feel that they gain weight when they enter the perimenopause years or the menopause transition years, to give it a wider context. And so once your ovaries stop producing estrogen, there are two places that your body will produce it as a woman. One is in your adrenal glands, which is also where you produce your stress hormones. The other is in your body fat. So your body is always going to prioritize dealing with stress first. So cortisol, adrenaline, those kind of hormones are going to be produced by your adrenal glands first. So estrogen's then taking a back seat from there. So where else does your body get estrogen from? Well, it gets it from your body fat. So your body then has more of a want and a desire physiologically to lay down more body fat. And so it starts both I believe stress creates a mental cascade, but also a physical cascade as well, which is why I think it's absolutely imperative to try and reduce some of those stresses. And ultimately, it's about finding some kind of balance, right, between your fight and flight mechanisms and your rest and digest ones. So as long as you're giving some time to self-care and you're allowing yourself to do that, then I think you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it is very nuanced, the whole conversation about stress, right? There's we're in a time exactly like you said that stress is likely probably one of the highest points in our life when we could experience these stressors. And I think learning to manage and work with these stressors is really, really crucial. You talk about mindset as being really important. So, yes, we can manage our schedules and try and work with that, but mindset can also really cause us to, be stressed out by the things around us as well, versus be able to manage them better. So, what do you have to say about our mindset as we age here?
Well, again, it's a twofold answer, kind of, Tracy. One is personal mindset. Yeah. What are you thinking? How are you talking to yourself? How kind are you being to yourself? Are questions that I would ask clients. I was reading a book the other day called Happy for No Reason, and the author of it shares that everybody used to think there was a set happiness point that we all had genetically, that we could only reach that as a maximum. And now new research has showed that part of that is genetic. So part of it will come from your genetic disposition, from your parents. Around 10% of it, so about half of it is genetic. About 10% of it is our circumstances. Am I in a good relationship? Am I making money? Have I got a roof over my head? Are my kids healthy? Is my partner healthy? Am I healthy? But then 40% of it comes from the way that we talk to ourselves,
Hmm.
thoughts we have, and the actions that we actually do. And you think about that when it comes to when we do something nice for somebody, it makes us feel good, right? So it's okay doing lots of nice things for everybody else, but let's do some nice things for ourselves as well and talk to ourselves kindly. So I think that is an important part of mindset. I think it's an important part of female mindset as well at this age to view, and part of this is societal, this the coming years as the chance of as the opportunity to explore, to try new things, to do something different, to be daring if you want, to try ways of reinventing yourself. You know, life doesn't end at 40. It really doesn't end at 40. I'm proof of that. At 40, my bodily statistics were miles behind where they are today. And then finally, I'd just say, just to caveat all that, that there's a societal issue here. You go and look at research. I don't, when I say you, I don't mean you personally, but look at research into tribes in South America, whereby achieving menopause is seen as a rite of passage and a positive rite of passage because you are now one of the elders of the tribe and you've got a lot of experience to pass on to the younger people in the tribe. And you contrast that with the way that we tend to see the menopause years, or we've been told to see the menopause years here in the Western world, whereby everything from the body image that women see in adverts to hearing amazing actresses in Hollywood talking about how there are no roles for them after 50. And in those remote South American tribes, their symptoms are much, much lower than they are here. Now, there'll be other elements that play into that, their diet, etc., etc. But I don't think it's coincidental that that positive mindset and that positive viewpoint of the menopause transition there causes less physical symptoms than it would do here in the West.
Yeah, that working on mindset is really huge. I totally agree with you there that the language that we have inside of our heads, the things that we say to ourselves, about our capacity, about how we're changing and shifting, that's just everything. It's just going to impact how we play out the rest of our lives, right? And that's a lot of work to shift that because those are deep neural pathways that we've had ingrained in our brain, that internal language since childhood. And I think being aware that we have this language inside of ourselves, how we speak to ourselves about ourselves, that's number one. Just being aware, be mindful. Like, listen inside of your head. What are you saying to yourself about yourself? And I caught myself this last week not being able to forgive myself for doing something, making a mistake and thinking that it was way graver than it actually was, not giving myself that compassion or curiosity to why I responded or behaved in a way. And I just found it really interesting that it was so easy, even though I feel like I've been doing the work, go to therapy or read self-help books or have conversations with my friends. It is something that just can come back in a nanosecond when you've done something wrong, or disappointed yourself. It's like, the grooves of a tin roof where the rain runs, those are the deep grooves. That's kind of like the neural pathways in our brain and that internal language. And to challenge that and to change that is a lot of work, and not just a one-time work. It's ongoing, isn't it?
It's an absolute lifetime of time of work. I keep referring back to my own journey, but I know what negative self-talk feels like. And it took me a long time to realize that making mistakes is part of the learning process. It's by making mistakes, it's by finding out what doesn't work that we find out what actually does work for ourselves. And we need to be much more accepting of our fallacies and see them as signposts to actually choosing the right journey. It's really easy, I think. And again, we get confused sometimes by the messages that we sent by society that everybody thinks that a health, fitness, self-discovery journey has to be this linear path where you start really low and you get to be really high by doing everything perfectly. And it's not like that. Journeys have ups and downs and they have bumps and they have grinds and you have changes in direction and you need to factor that in to your thinking, I think, and allow yourself to say, just normalize that process that it's okay to do things and it not work, because then you do find out what does work.
What sort of nutrition changes do you think are important as we move toward this phase?
So, in sort of like order, protein, right? Super important. Incredibly important. Good fats, super important. Why is protein important? Well, all the stuff that we know about, many of your listeners will know about because they listen to your amazing podcast. Yeah, laying down muscle, helping build hormones, helping with your immune system, helping your bones stay healthy. The same with good fats. Again, all these amazing things. Cooking from scratch, eating a colorful array of vegetables, adding in some things like phytonutrients that will have some estrogenic type qualities. All those things can help. As much as anything, I often find that it's not just what women eat at this time of life, but it's actually sometimes how they eat it as well. And I think again, looking at things like the neuropaths we have, the way we condition ourselves, how many of us sit at our desks while answering an angry email from our bosses or a client or something like that, while trying to stuff a sandwich down at the same time. And it's so I think it's twofold. I think one is just good, wholesome cooking, maybe Mediterranean style diet, um, cooking from scratch, but then also being mindful and taking the time out to actually eat slowly, digest properly, allow our bodies to actually go through that process without putting them under stress at the same time, because you're actually working once again on two different pathways. If on the one hand you're super stressed out and on the other you're trying to digest your food, your body isn't working on digestion at that point in time. So I think that's really, really important too. I think it's important to not see everything again as an all or nothing process. It's very easy to get bogged down in things like, oh, I've got to have X number of grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, and I've got to eat exactly 30 vegetables, and I've got to have protein with every single meal. If you try and do that all at once, it's a really, really big step to take. And the biggest steps that we take, the more we overwhelm ourselves, the more challenging it could be. So I would always say, whether you're working on your health, your fitness, your nutrition, whatever it may be, try and just pick one or two habits to improve at a time. I think I saw some research the other day that says if you work on one habit at a time, you're 80 to 90% successful at making that a habit full time. If you try and work on two, that drops to 30%. Well, that's a massive drop off. So if you're trying to do lots of things all at once, this idea of going on restrictive diets whereby suddenly your calories are dropping and your foods are dropping and you're cutting food groups out, all that kind of stuff. They tend to be massive challenges that end up overwhelming people, which is why people don't stick to them. The classic thing is, I'm going to start on January the 1st. We know that's around the corner. I'm sure many listeners will be thinking about the same thing. What are they going to do? Research shows that 80% of people by the end of mid-January have already given up on their resolution. And it's usually because they've set the bar far too high. So I'd say when it comes to making changes, set a low bar so low you can't even trip over it.
I
Achieve
love
it.
that. I love that. I am so with you on that. Yeah, they set it so high and then they falter and then they're like, this doesn't work.
Yeah. If you can't fit 30 different colored vegetables in a week, try with two.
Yeah.
If all you're having is green, throw a bit of red in for a couple of weeks. Yeah. Then you can introduce some purple, then you can introduce some white, then you can introduce something else. Then you can take the kids to the store and get them to choose something that you've never had before as a family. All those other things that build onto it can come down. But if you try and just go for 30 different veg in a week in the first from day one to the next day, it's really difficult to make it a sustainable practice.
Let's go back to talking about how we eat because I looked at some research not too long ago as well that talked about the pace that we eat and how if we're eating in a 5 to 7 minute window, our meal versus in a 20-minute window will consume. It was somewhere between 100 and 150 extra calories per meal because of that speed that we're eating, which makes sense. Maybe it wasn't that high in calories, but it was an additional amount of calories. And if you're doing that over 3 meals a day, over 7 days a week, over 30 days a month, that is going to add up. So one of the things we teach in our membership too is one bite, one breath. So you pick up your fork and you take a bite of your food and you put your fork down and you take a breath, or you have a conversation, or you have a sip of water, or you just breathe and notice your hunger and satiety levels, like you're paying attention on purpose. And yeah, I'd like to know what you think about that emotional relationship with food and how we can go about improving that. Because come January, I think that is a wise skill to learn to improve versus I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to start restricting, right? Because I need to lose weight. But what if we began to focus on something that is a skill that can sustain us forever and ever going forward?
I couldn't agree with you more there, Tracy. One of the things that I'm always amazed by, the things that Audrey, my mum, used to tell me when I was a kid, chew your food, James, 20 to 30 times, things like that, you know, are actually, well, I used to think it was old wives' tales, but they're actually embedded in science, right? Slow down your eating, chew your food properly. By chewing, that's the part of the mechanical breakup. Amylase from your saliva comes in and starts breaking down those starches properly if you're chewing your food properly and slowing things down. The whole digestive process slows down and takes the time that it needs to take. I think it's 20 minutes that it takes for your gut to talk to your brain to tell you that you're full. So if you just piling in food really quickly because you're stressed out, because you're trying to eat at your desk, because you're not giving yourself that time and allowing yourself that time is a real challenge and often a reason why people find themselves overeating. I try and encourage people a little bit like you to do things like putting cutlery down between mouthfuls, maybe having a journal by them and or writing something down. And if that kind of stuff doesn't work, try and have one meal a day where you sit down with the family and just talk to each other about how your day has gone, because that will slow things down. If you look at the culture in, let's say, France, whereby they take long lunches, and it might be a 2 hour lunch or something like that, and they'll have a glass of wine, there'll be loads of butter in the food and that kind of stuff. They don't have the same obesity problems that we have here in the West because they actually see food as an experience and sit down and enjoy it. And I think that is something that we've forgotten somewhat how to do in Canada, the UK, the US.
When we talk about losing body fat, and this is something that lots of women come to me for, and I'm sure that that's why they come to you. They want to lose weight, they want to lose body fat. And there are a lot of specific ways to go about that, right? There's not just one way that you can begin to do that. There's lots of different strategies, and we teach a bunch of different ones at Move Daily Fitness as well. Um, One of the most accurate ways, of course, can be if you're tracking, right? You can track in an app, ensuring that you're tracking specific calories, macronutrients, and understanding that. I think that can be a really good learning curve for people because I think that understanding which foods are which macronutrient, how much protein you're getting. Oftentimes, when we guess, we're not accurate at all. And this includes how many calories we're burning vis-a-vis a workout as well. But one of the strategies that I think we all could benefit from is this intuitive eating and really understanding those hunger and satiety levels. Could you talk to us a little bit about what intuitive eating actually looks like?
Well, I think it looks like eating somewhat with intention. So sitting down for a meal, allowing yourself the time to actually have that meal, maybe taking 10, 15 deep breaths before you actually sit down and eat. So you're engaging your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest and digest systems. So you're getting them there. And then thinking about when you're actually full rather than necessarily being dictated to by what you or someone else has put on your plate. And it's really fine to say, that's enough, thank you. You know, I've had enough. It doesn't mean I didn't like the meal or any of those other kind of things that we kind of put on ourselves or other people put on us. It just means I've had enough. I feel satiated. I feel as though I don't need to eat anymore. Use your hand as a kind of guide. So a palm full of protein, a fistful of veggies, a thumb full of good fats. a cupped handful of carbs, and trying to eyeball it so that you can just get used to what works for you. And if that in the early days, that comes back to stripping it back to real sort of like basics. Have I got sort of like two-thirds of a third of my plate or up to half my plate, good, fresh, healthy veggies? Have I got a small portion of starchy carbs there? Because contrary to what we're told, carbs aren't the enemy. We do need some carbs in our life. Um, have I got some protein on there? Have I got good fats on there? So just trying to appreciate food for what it is and allowing our bodies to tell us what's going on. I find journaling is a fantastic tool for intuitive to eating. You know, what are you thinking? What are you tasting? Just make some notes around those things. You can buy all kinds of journals these days that have got pre-printed sections in for intuitive eating and things like that, whereby it's just really, really simple and nice to have as a practice. And you don't have to do
Well,
it every single, just do it once every couple of days and see where you are, see if it doesn't help.
yeah, I think it can give you real good insight as well if you're eating for a specific, sorry, if you're eating for a specific reason other than hunger, right?
Mm.
So I went to the pantry. I just had gotten an email. I was feeling down about it. I went to the pantry and I devoured XYZ. Yeah, I wasn't hungry, right? But it was something emotional inside of me that I wanted not to feel in the moment. And I think that's a really important thing to begin to explore as well. And I like what you said about journaling that down because in the moment, we may not be even conscious why we're going to the pantry to eat and to feel different. But it's true. You know, we sometimes feel feelings that arise. They're uncomfortable. We don't want to sit with them. We don't want to feel them. And so, what would feel different is something sweet or salty or savory in my mouth, right? That could give me that instant dopamine flood that this is going to feel
Mm.
good in the moment. And so I eat the thing, but then I have to chase that feeling. Right. And that first cookie might give us everything that we need to feel different in the moment, but it's a difficult chase after that. Then you're constantly chasing the dopamine hit. And I think, as we talked about at the beginning, part of that work is just exploring what's going on inside of us, right? What's driving us toward not wanting to feel some difficult feelings and wanting to medicate those feelings with food. And this isn't the case for everyone, but I think a lot of women can feel like they've let others down, they've let themselves down. And to feel challenging, difficult, uncomfortable feelings is real hard to go through. We don't want to feel that. We'd rather just have something sweet in our mouth, and that makes us feel good in the moment until it doesn't.
It's a really interesting exercise that we take our clients through who are challenged by this, and it's just a simple break the chain exercise. A lot of, if we call it comfort eating or snacking that doesn't serve us, whatever you want to call it, is caused by a chain of events. Something's led up to that moment where you go to the pantry and you open it and you dive into the kids' snack drawer and you grab a cheap bar of chocolate or a bag of chips or whatever it may be. So just a simple sheet of paper with what was I doing 2 hours beforehand? What was I doing 1 hour beforehand? What was I thinking when it happened? How did I feel afterwards?
Mhm.
Making a note of who was there and just looking and seeing, is there a point within that chain that you could change one thing? If you can't find the chain link that you could break, that's absolutely fine. What it does do, it just brings a little bit more awareness to our feelings. And I would always say to someone, rather than going and opening that snack drawer and eating that chocolate bar behind your hand quickly as though you're committing, the seventh deadliest sin, if you're going to do it, take it, sit down and enjoy it. And if you enjoy it mindfully, you might actually find that it's not all it's cracked up to be. It may be that if you sit down and you enjoy it intentionally, that one or two mouthfuls of the chocolate bar or one or two squares is much more palatable, enjoyable than actually devouring the whole thing. So I think it's just a case of trying to get ourselves more aware of the feelings around food. If it's something that we think doesn't serve us. And I don't believe that there are good and bad foods, Tracy. I believe
Yeah.
there are foods that serve a goal that we want to get to, and there's some foods that don't serve that. And if we can eat more of the foods that serve where we want to get to in the goal, and less of those that don't serve us, we're probably going to head towards the goal with some pretty decent momentum. I suppose the other thing then you need to think about, and something that we've not even discussed, but I love delving into it with clients, and I'm sure you do too, is why? Why do you want to make these changes in the first place? What is your ultimate goal? What values do you want to be around that ultimate goal, and how you want to live your life, and how you want to present yourself? Because it's then that you feel that emotional connection with a goal, rather than the goal just being, oh, I want to lose 7 pounds. Why do you want to lose 7 pounds? What's the reason for that? What's underlying it? And if you can get in touch with the emotions that are behind that why, I think it's a much more powerful driver for all of us to be able to reach our goals, because there's real emotional connection with the goal rather than it just being an arbitrary number on a scale or a dress size or whatever it may be.
It really is about awareness, and this whole shift in our hormones and this change of season for life can be an opportunity for us to begin to pay more attention to self, right? Ask ourselves those questions, explore our emotions and feelings, explore this relationship with food. And it can be a really exciting time. I think a lot of us, are turning our nose up at this shift in life, but how I'm seeing it is an opportunity to know myself better. And I think that is the key. James, thanks
Right.
so much for your time here today. Where can people follow you, find you, work with you? Can you let us know?
Sure. So if Instagram is probably the easiest one, I'm at Fabulous Beyond 40 Coaching. I work with a woman as a business partner, Julie. For those people who don't want to work with a guy, I've got a girl there as well, so they can choose that option. And we also offer a free 45-minute intention setting call for anybody who's thinking about working with us. We promise that's not a sales call; it's to help you get some steps in the right direction. Of course, if you do want to find out it's like to work with us afterwards, we can share that with you as well. So that is just freecall.fabulousbeyond40coaching.com.
Excellent. And I'll share that in the show notes below. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. As always, go move daily in your fitness, wellness, and nutrition. And we'll see you all in the next Move Daily Talks.